I'm going to start with a kind of a interesting statement here. I don't think it's as easy to live a good life as TikTok would have you believe. Okay? I just don't think it's that easy. If you listen to TikTok or that kind of culture, it might say something like, be as beautiful as you can be, drink as much as you want, party hard, and get to be with the cool people, and life will be great. I don't believe that's true, but I think that's out there. The good life, I believe, is the life some people choose to live with strong faith in a great God. Because every one of you is going to need God someday. You probably already have, many of you. And if you've kept and cultivated a great connection to him, you're going to be very glad you did. Very glad you did. This week I had an occasion. I was visiting a hospital downtown, and I was in the Oakland area of the city. And as I was sitting at a stoplight, and I was watching the kids from Pitt just kind of cross in front of me. And one of the things that struck me is over the last 100 years or so, the world has gotten a lot smaller. You know what I mean by that? In other words, cultures that used to feel very remote and different now are on our doorstep, and so we mix a lot more. And so it's made the world a lot smaller. And one of the things that exposure to the world has generated is what I would call the appeal of theological relativism. And let me explain what I mean by that. By that I mean the idea that all religious ideas are culturally derived. They're derived out of particular cultures, and that none holds the advantage over any others. Simply put, ideas about God are simply opinions that are equally valid. But you should never say at any time that any one idea about God is true for all people at all times. So I call that theological relativism. I think we're all used to that in our time. Now, some of you sitting here are going to one day find yourself in a class, maybe in college. You're going to be talking to your peers, and they're going to laugh at you if you say you believe in God. And if you say the Bible is uniquely true, they're going to kind of snicker at you. That is going to happen. And when you tell your friends you grew up in church, they're going to say something like this. So did I. Let's go get high. That'll happen. That's the world we live in. But before I quote the book of Acts today, I'm going to quote another great wise person, and that's Bear Grylls. So Bear Grylls was in the British Special Forces, then he did that show on Discovery Channel called Man vs. Wild. And here's what he said in an article I found on Christian Post this week that I thought was very interesting. He begins by talking about church. He says, probably most of the people in the congregation have substance abuse, and probably most of their congregations struggle with porn and all that sort of stuff. What a relief it is when a pastor can stand up and go, welcome to the hospital, folks. Here we go. I'm just standing alongside you on the road, failing our way through, but reaching out of desperation for life and love and redemption. Let's look outwards and love people, and we're in it together. That's a great line, right? Yeah, that's what I think. Bear Grylls. I'm quoting Bear Grylls today. I'm going all in on Bear. Now, here's how he goes on. Talks about his own faith. And this is a book that he wrote recently on mental toughness, which I thought, it's a great subject. He says the solution is always found in connection with the Almighty. There's always struggle, there's always hardship, but there's always faith, and faith always wins. Faith conquers everything. In terms of preparing us for life and keeping us mentally strong, faith is always key. Good stuff, right? Now, I want you young people particularly to listen to me. You have to decide what kind of people you're going to be. You have to decide what kind of people you're going to be. And those moments when somebody says to you, you're stupid to believe in God, you have to think about the real world, not the world of TikTok, the real world. And you have to look at the real world of people who follow God and have character to love and serve and do good and make a difference. And remember them when your TikTok friends tell you you're silly to believe in God. I was with a couple from our church this week. He's quite ill, so he can't get out to church anymore. They served as missionaries in Thailand for quite a while. And the people they in particular were called to, I don't remember the name of them, but they were hill people living on the hillside of Thailand who were forgotten by everybody because they were viewed as the lowest of the low in Thailand. And so this couple did all kinds of things to minister to them and to serve them as missionaries. They said one of the things we could do in that particular culture of Thailand is we could help the children who would have cleft palates. And he said what we would do is, he said, it was $15 for the bus ride to the hospital. It was $15 for the surgery and care. And it was $15 to stay for that period of time when they had to have the surgery. And he said, we did this with all kinds of children, $45. And he said, I'd see those kids years later, and you never know that they had this disability. And they would do this with child after child after child. This couple, over the course of their lives, told me they took in 47 foster children. Now, what happens is that the world gives a caricature of Christians. What they do is they show pictures of the nutcases, like the Westboro Baptist Church are holding up signs that say God hates fags. And they say, this is the way all Christians are. And friends, that's not true. It's not even close to true. When someone tells you that Christians are bigoted, narrow-minded people who are stuck in the past, young people, I want you to remember how your family and your church gathered tens of thousands of dollars, what we call the Acts Fund, to help people who needed their furnaces fixed, or young people who couldn't afford to fix their cars so that they could keep working as $12 an hour people. I want you to remember that that's what your church did. I want you to remember how a couple of years ago, your church at the end of the year said, we've got some extra mission dollars, and we had an extra gift, and we went and said, let's help this couple, Joel's friends over in India. What's the name of that project? What's it called? The Daisy Project? And we're going to help them, this couple, who are going to convert this building so they can take care of street children in Calcutta, right? And these great people who are laying down their lives, who could be doing other things to make money, instead, they're asking churches for $25,000 so that they can build a center to take care of children in Calcutta. You remember them. And you remember your parents. And you remember how they, like all of us, struggled through COVID. But remember how their faith and their connection to a community made all the difference in the world for them. And when that person whose idea of the good life is taking pictures of themselves and posting them for likes, and for whom the extent of their helping the disenfranchised is wearing a t-shirt, when they tell you they know better how to live than you and your Christian family, you tell them they're full of crap. Because I want to tell you, anyone can go with the crowd. That's the path of least resistance today, to wear a t-shirt and just be for a cause. It takes a unique person to stand up and say, I'm not going to turn my back on God. You go wherever you want. I don't get it right all the time, but as for me and my house, I'm going to follow Jesus. That is going against the tide today. That's the way to go. And that brings us to our passage today, because Philip, the guy we're going to be looking at here, he's telling this guy that Jesus is true and worth following with your whole life. And here's the way it goes, and I'm in Acts chapter 8, and I think I'm beginning in verse 24 here. It says this. Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, go south to the road, the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. So he started out, and on his way he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of all the treasury of Kandake, which means Queen of the Ethiopians. This man had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and he was on his way home. He was sitting on his chariot reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. The Spirit told Philip, go to that chariot and stay near it. Now, I just want to ask you this. When it said that he was told to go up to the chariot and stay near it, it was moving. It was very likely moving. And so he's probably doing this. Hey, what you reading? Hey, yeah. That's what's happening here. So it says in Acts 8:30, then Philip ran up to the chariot, probably ran alongside the chariot, heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. And it went something like this. Do you understand? Excuse me. What you're reading? Could you stop? The man would have been reading out loud, because I learned this. When you read back in that time, you read out loud. Did you know that? I didn't know that either. And the guy says, how can I unless someone explains it to me? So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. And don't you think Philip's saying, thank you. I can stop running here. Verse 32. This is the passage of scripture the eunuch was reading. And now it's the quote from Isaiah. He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth. The eunuch asked Philip, tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else? Then Philip began with that very passage of scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but that kind of thing doesn't happen to me that much, right? Where you just hear someone reading. in your evangelism history, have you ever had someone reading a prophetic passage about Jesus and say, hey, can you explain this to me? I mean, that doesn't happen that much. I mean, you're an Ethiopian official, you're returning from worship, so you're a worshiper. You happen to be in close proximity to one of the few leaders of the early church, Philip, and you're reading what is undoubtedly the most clear prophecy of the Messiah. And so, pretty remarkable. Now, if you've been studying with us over the book of Acts and before that, we use something called the Discovery Bible method. And one of the questions it asks after you read the passage a few times is, what does this passage tell you about God? And that's what I'm going to answer for you today. I wonder what you would think if I gave you a few moments or broke you up into small groups and say, what does this passage tell you about God? What this passage tells you about God is that if he wants to get his message to Ethiopia, he can take the travels of an Ethiopian official, have them make a chance meeting with one of the few leaders of the Christian church, and he can add that guy to his army of evangelists over in Ethiopia. This is what I want you to say. Read this with me. God can get whatever he wants done by putting the right person in the right place at exactly the right time. That's what this shows, right? And guess what? Read this with me too. And sometimes you are going to be that person he put in that place at the right time. God can do that. That's what he showed with this Ethiopian guy. And this is why I'm going to just put this out there, and I think you probably know this about me if you've been around. I'm part of what's called the Reformed tradition. The Reformed tradition believes in the sovereign action of God in human affairs and believes that God predestines and acts and does amazing things. And I just want to show you 4 passages that I've always thought kind of make this clear. And what I want you to watch for in these passages, who's in charge? Is it us or God? Because we say, I have free will, say, but read these passages and you tell me who's in charge of this. Okay, passage 1, John 15. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, okay? Who does the choosing? Wait, go back. Who does the choosing? This is Jesus speaking. Go ahead, say it. It's always the right answer.
Jesus.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I think this is Paul. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ. And notice that's like the passive sense for us. It has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, so your belief has been granted to you, but also to suffer for him. Okay, go on to the next passage. No, Jesus. No one can, notice the ability, lack of ability. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. Say there. No one can come. We lack ability. We lack ability because we have this natural bent against God that he has to overcome. And then the last one of these, I think. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. You see who has agency in this? You see who has the power in it? God set up that Ethiopian that day because God is the kind of being he is. Now, some people don't like this, or like to say, if God's sovereign, why should we even share our faith if he's in control, if he's in charge? And I have never understood that concern. I'll tell you why. Because if God is not sovereign, and if he's not influencing people's wills to choose him, nobody ever will. Because we are naturally bent against him and toward ourselves and our selfishness. God has to intervene. It's called prevenient grace. I don't think anybody ever says, I'm a Christian, I saved myself. And what do we say? We say, I was saved. God is the initiator. Now, what does this say about God? It says that he has this power. God can get whatever he wants done by putting the right person in the right place at exactly the right time. That's the lesson. The application is, and sometimes you are going to be that person that he put in that place at that time. Do you believe that? Do you believe that sometimes he's going to put you into someone's life? I'm here because at some point in my 20s, God said, I want you to go tell people that they can have life in Jesus, like you have found. How do you think about yourself? Are you a person who's letting the poison of the world get into your system? Or are you a person who says, I'm bringing the love of God into the system? I want to tell you something. I'm not the victim of anything. Victimhood is very big these days. I am not passive. I don't go out of the world with a bucket of needs that needs to be filled. Let me tell you who I am, and I want this to be true of you. I am a representative of the sovereign ruler of everything, who presides over a kingdom of love and is calling people like you and me to be part of his army of men and women who bear witness to his son, Jesus Christ, in a world that's lost and perishing. That's who I am. And I hope you're that kind of person too. Faith in God is a choice. And really smart people make that choice, and really smart people reject that choice. I remember when I got to Gordon Conwell Seminary in my 20s, and my theology professor was a guy named Roger Nicole. I ended up being his teaching assistant. He read and spoke in 5 languages. He had graduated from the Sorbonne in Switzerland and from Harvard. He was a brilliant, brilliant man. My Hebrew professor was a guy named Gordon Hugenberger, who graduated first in his class from Harvard. Of course, this was a New England seminary in physics. And he was just brilliant. You have to decide, what kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to decide to follow God because you hear him call you? I remember the call he put on my life was, I did this for you, and I would have done it for you if you were the only person. And I said, okay, I'm yours, decision made. But what's your decision? Have you heard his call to be his? I'm going to tell you something. I think part of the weakness of the modern church is it attracts all kinds of people who want to be entertained but never hear and respond to the call of God. You hear what I'm saying? They come to be entertained, and they love that, but they never hear and respond to the call of God. So when you ask them to obey God, they're not interested. And it's because they don't know God, because if they knew him, they would follow him. And if you're not following him, you don't know him. If you knew him, you'd follow him. Passage finishes. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, here's water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized? And he gave orders to stop the chariot. Then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away. We don't know how that happened. And the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. Philip, however, appeared at Azotus and traveled about, preaching the gospel in all the towns until he reached Caesarea. Friends, the first sign of a real relationship with God is you want to do what he tells you to do. And that's what happened to this eunuch. He says, hey, if that's what God says, I'm going to do it. Has God ever called you? Has he called you to do something? Do you realize what an honor that is? I know what it's like to feel that urge to sit when God's called you and told you, I want you to do something. But God doesn't give up. And if he's decided to use you, you might as well just give in, because he won't give up on you. And I can honestly not think of one moment in my life that I have regretted saying yes to God and saying, I'm going to follow you.